it's going to be, these lists are going to be so fucking hard. It's just.
Hey guys, welcome back to Listography. This is Jason here, joined as always by Kramzer and Joe. Today is a new show idea that we got on the channel. Not an original idea. A lot of people on YouTube do things similar to this. We're going to task ourselves with picking the best album from every year dating back to 1965. We're also going to give you 4 runners-up each for each year. So 1965, we're sort of choosing that as the starting point, as it's kind of like the beginning of the LP era, sort of where LPs start to outsell singles, sort of brought on by the popularity of the Beatles. So what else is going on musically in 1965? Beatles came to the US in 64. So here in 65, you've got the British invasion in full swing. You've got bands like the Hollies, Chad and Jeremy, the Zombies, the Animals, Donovan, Manfred Mann, the Yardbirds, etc. Lots of British bands coming over and making waves. Here in the States, you've got groups like the Lovin' Spoonful and the Byrds putting out albums. Also, you're seeing the very beginnings of the sort of garage rock movement in the US, which was spurned on by the Beatles' popularity and kids getting instruments and starting their own bands in their garages. You see the first sort of major release in this genre in 1965. You get Here Are the Sonics, and then you'd see a lot more of this in 66 and 67. You also have significant releases in folk with Jackson C. Frank and Bert Jantz releasing albums. You've got Nina Simone putting out some of her best material, Son House. You got Johnny Cash and Buck Owens putting out significant country albums. So there's a lot going on, but even with all of this, I don't know how diverse our lists are going to be because you've got these sort of giants standing in the shadows of even gianter giants. You've got 3 albums released by the Beach Boys in 65, 3 by the Stones in 65, 2 by the Beatles, and 2 by Bob Dylan. So I don't know these guys' lists yet. We'll see how much diversity we get. I have a feeling here in the mid-60s we might be very similar in some of our choices, but I'll let one of them get it started.
Also want to mention that other than the LPs that are getting really popular, that Motown and, it's kind of a golden age of pop music, though, that's going to kind of fade away soon, but I still think for 1965 it's very much worth mentioning. I guess I'll start.
Well, I do want to say, I'm glad you brought that up. I had in my notes and didn't get to it. Motown is big at this time. They had 5 #1 singles in 1965, including Can't Help Myself, My Girl, Stop in the Name of Love. And another significant thing that happened in 65, this is the year that Dylan went electric at the Newport Folk Festival, sort of a mythological moment in rock history. How significant it actually was is, I guess, debatable, but yeah, that's all in 65.
All right, so a couple of pretty good early records by the Kinks and a really good record by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles are albums that were on my radar but didn't get in there. So it's a bit of a monopoly for me. My 4 runners-up are going to be Rubber Soul by the Beatles, Help by the Beatles, Bring It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, and The Zombies by The Zombies. However, my favorite album of 1965 is Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. Is this the best Bob Dylan album? My favorite Bob Dylan album? Maybe. We'll see when we eventually get to the listography of Bob Dylan. Obviously, I like it more than Bringing It All Back Home. This is, the first year, as Jason said, that he went electric, and it sounds really awesome on this album. I love how this album kind of has a real lot of that 60s culture and spirit, especially in the title track. A little bit of anti-establishment, kind of playing off of old gospel and biblical notes. The thing that stands out for me most is you're always going to find great songwriting on Dylan and the 3 albums or so that he did before 1965. Songwriting is no exception here. It's absolutely fantastic. But the thing that stands out to me is kind of this nice blend of live blues band music and his sort of blending of poetry. It gels really well. The tones on this album are great with his sort of arrogance and his voice, and this really cool, just honky-tonk, almost like sunken piano sound that's littered throughout the album, and the guitars are really loose. I love it. His lyrics on this album are really vivid and picturesque. Like most good Dylan albums, you're hanging on every word he has to say. Like a Rolling Stone and Ballad of a Thin Man are two songs that come to mind when I think of my all-time favorite songs. So it's really hard for me to put any other album as the best of 65. You also have Tombstone Blues on this, Queen Jane approximately. Desolation Row is a really awesome way to close it. It's the only song that kind of goes back to his faithful, loyal folk friends. You know, he gets rid of all the electric for that and did an 11-minute storytelling epic to close out the album. It's fantastic all the way through. It was pivotal, like Jason said, when he went electric, and it changed, you know, a lot of the course for rock music history. So I thought, looking at it on paper, that this was going to be really tight down to this and Rubber Soul, but the more I listened to it, this was a pretty comfortable win for me, as much as I like Rubber Soul and the other albums that I had. So 1965 for me, Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited.
Alrighty. Well, I guess that brings it to me. I had Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited on my top 5 as well, even though I'm not a huge Dylan fan, but this is probably my favorite. I love Like a Rolling Stone. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. Some of the other albums I had on my list included, I'm glad Kramzer brought this up earlier, Going to a Go-Go by Smokey Robinson, and The Miracles. I had The Who's debut record, My Generation, which came out right at the end of 65. I really like that one. It doesn't really sound like other Who albums, but it's right in the kind of mod world, and it has a different sound, which I like. My second one is Rubber Soul by the Beatles. Not my favorite Beatles album. I still think they're a little raw, and they're not quite to the level of what they'd achieve on Revolver. My number one is going to be the Beach Boys, which with Beach Boys Today, it's really sort of like the precursor to Pet Sounds. It's where Brian Wilson really starts to take hold of the band. He recorded some of the songs, and then he smoked some weed after a nervous breakdown and kind of like became the Brian Wilson that I think we all in this group and most of America, or at least the critics, loved, the one that would make Pet Sounds and then kind of go crazy again. But on Today, he kind of got away from the surfing, the childish kind of stuff. He wanted to grow up on this album, and I think it really does. He wanted to make a complete album, not just a collection of singles. And not that it's not sunny and poppy. You know, the first half is kind of that, it's kind of classic Beach Boys style. Do you want to dance? Help Me Rhonda, Dance, Dance, Dance. You know, you can kind of see a theme. It's still sunny, it's still pop, it's still California. But then on the second half, he kind of switches over to some of the deeper ballads. Kiss Me Baby has an incredible orchestration, beautiful build-up. She Knows Me Too Well, he kind of gets into deeper philosophical love. You know, it's not just puppy love, here for the summer kind of thing. This album is more orchestral. There's more instruments going on. He really kind of gets into the studio and starts to experiment. And, you know, he and the Beatles kind of go back and forth with their studio wizardry. They kind of spur each other on to create better and better albums. So this, for me, just a really good kind of precursor to Pet Sounds, really where the Beach Boys start to become more than just the sunny California pop band.
I think we're going to get 3 different number ones here, which I did not expect. I really wanted to put I've Got a Tiger by the Tail at number 5 by Buck Owens. Really love that album and that sort of sound going on here in the mid-60s. It just misses my list. I just couldn't justify putting it over these other 5. Number 5, I've got the Beach Boys Today, probably my second favorite Beach Boys album after Pet Sounds. Don't hold me to that. I'm sure there's a Beach Boys listography coming down the line and that could change, but right now I feel like it's probably number 2. At number 3 and 4, also in no particular order because there's a Dylan list coming up soon and I don't want to give anything away. And I couldn't decide quite yet. Highway 61 and Bringing It All Back Home. Number 2 for me, the first runner-up is Help by the Beatles. And number 1 is going to be Rubber Soul. I mean, how much more can I say about Rubber Soul than's already been said? A huge step for the Beatles into further creativity, really getting into the studio, seeing what they can do, using it as an instrument. Hugely influential on Pet Sounds, which would then influence Sgt. Pepper. Just Huge leaps happening here in the mid 60s in terms of songwriting and harmony and recording, and it's all really starting to come together here on Rubber Soul, and that's my favorite album of 65. All right, thank you for watching, guys. We're going to be doing one of these videos every week, so next week you'll be getting 1966, so you can start digging into your 66 records and make your own list. Get ready to comment on that video. Let us know your favorite records of 65 on this video down below. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and we will see you next time on Albums of the Year.